All right. Hello, professionals. My name is Rico Aladdin, and I'm the founder of Professional Lunch. Today, we have Kriss Burns. She is an HR business consultant and an adjunct professor for you, Mary. And I am so happy to have Chris here in the studio for a professional lunch. Chris, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Rico.
Wonderful, wonderful. Before we start the conversation, we talk about careers, we talk about resume and stuff like that can help young people find a career path.
Yeah.
Please tell the professional lunch audience a little bit about yourself.
About me?
Yes.
All right. Well, um, I'm from a small town in Minnesota called Spicer. I grew up there and then went on to college. Um, I went into fashion merchandising, if you can believe it. Way back in the day, I wanted to be a teacher, but back in the 80s, there were a lot of teacher strikes happening. And so my counselor, talked me out of it. And
Yeah.
so, like, what was plan B? And so, because I kind of grew up in a retail family, that was, that was my next progression. And so, went to school for fashion merchandising, worked for a company called Vanity, which was actually their corporate office was right here in Fargo, and worked there for 12 years. And so, I opened 19 stores in 5 different states.
My goodness.
I was in Iowa.
Mhm.
I went to Colorado, and then from Colorado, they transferred me here to Fargo. And so Fargo was the corporate office here. Um, really wasn't the fashion mecca of the world like I had dreamed of, but
Mhm.
it got me closer to home. So, and anyway, yeah, it was a great career when I was young and single and, before kids.
Yeah.
And then after, I had kids, the travel and the nights and the weekends, that was kind of a bit much. And so I really looked at like, what do I want to do? And what are my transferable skills? And because I had hired all these vanity girls,
Mhm.
across all these states and opened all these stores, I did all the onboarding and interviewing and um, recruiting. Uh, Getting into staffing and recruiting was my next step,
Okay.
and I did that for almost 20 years
Wow.
before I joined Pro Resources, and so a big part of my life. But it was the transferable skills that I had from opening, all those stores way back when that led me to that industry.
Wonderful. So I'm glad you have been in that industry for a while because this is one of the issues that we are seeing now with young people that are in college trying to find a career path. And so
Yes.
it's decades of experience. You open many stores, you get to hire many people. You've been in recruiting, so you are the perfect guest to talk about this today.
Well, I don't
So,
know about perfect, but
yeah, so we're gonna talk about that a little bit. So career preparation and job search is a um, it's a challenge for young professionals
absolutely.
who are in college trying to find to do that. So, if a college student is listening to this now, how early should that college student start preparing for their job search, and what should they focus on 1st?
Oh gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they should start that search immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Start thinking about what they want to do. So,
Mm-hmm.
what their degree, where does where is that going to lead them?
Okay.
Um, and even look at employment that's going to help them steer them, you know, to that occupation.
Okay.
So whether it's a part-time job, an internship, or even volunteering somewhere to gain those skills that will lead them down that path to where they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's never too early.
Yeah. So, and then if even if they were to have, let's say, different industry, is that general what they should do? Right? Are you talking about generally?
Well, I mean, depending on what, so let's just say, for example,
Hmm.
they're going to school for finance.
Okay.
Maybe working at a bank might lead them down that path
Yeah.
because there's your career path within a bank can lead
Hmm.
you to, many different areas.
Okay.
Um, so, I mean, just as an example, or say you want to go into the medical field, working in a nursing home or a group home
Mhm.
or something like that.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm trying to get. Oh, there you go. That's better. Yeah. So, what are some of the common mistakes that recent graduates make when job hunting?
Oh gosh.
and how they can avoid it,
Sure.
obviously.
I would say having only one resume or sending just blasting it out to, hundreds of employers.
Mhm.
Um, that that's not going to help.
Yeah.
I think they need to like tailor their resume to each position they're applying for.
Mm.
And be very specific. I mean, take time, to really tailor your resume and use those keywords that are in that job description or that posting.
Mhm.
Show them what the employer wants to see.
Okay. Wonderful. So, show them what the employee want to see.
Hmm.
Are you talking about the experience should they show, because some of them may not have the experience.
Right.
So in a way that someone who maybe works on some projects,
Yes.
I could you elaborate more a little bit on that? Show them what they want to see. You don't want just add the things, but you want to just combine it with what your skills are. Right? Is
Yep.
that what you mean?
Yep.
Hmm.
And I would take those keywords, whether they've learned that skill through a project in school
Hmm.
or through volunteering or a part-time job. But if it's, a certain skill set that they're looking for
Hmm.
in the posting, put that, right front and center, like in your qualification summary
Yeah.
and bold it. So because when a recruiter or a hiring manager looks at a resume, they really give it like a 6-second scan. And if they don't see those keywords jump out at them,
Hmm.
or if it's on page 2, I mean, they're going to just be put in a pile. So,
Yeah. Yes, we hear that a lot. They don't spend much time on resumes and stuff.
yeah.
So how can candidates, we're talking about young professionals here, and when I define the way I define young professionals, people who are in college getting a major, trying to launch their careers, or somebody who maybe leave college and then want to start their careers. Right, this is what I mean by early career professionals and
Yep.
young professionals. So, how can candidates craft a compelling personal brand that attract potential employers?
Oh, how do they craft a
Pers-
professional or
a
personal
personal
brand?
brand, yeah.
Well, look at you. You've done a good job with that. I think you should tell us that. I mean, you dress the part. You look at your hat as your
Yeah,
signature. You've created your own brand.
yeah. Thank
And
you.
so I think when young professionals, really are when they're looking for a job or they're networking or trying to meet new people,
Mhm,
they too need to dress the part,
mhm.
right? Dress the way you would when you go to that job,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Yes, exactly. So, earlier we were talking about resume and how they're supposed to, work on their resume. So, what are some of the key elements every resume you think should include uh, for people who has, college students who have little experience, not too much experience in the workforce?
Well, I mean, if they don't have a lot of professional experience, like in the
Hmm.
workforce, I mean, they've done something,
Hmm.
right? Whether they were in high school and they
Hmm.
were in sports,
Yeah,
or they volunteered, or maybe they were in Boy Scouts, or
yeah.
they were, on some type of a team. And what did they learn by doing that? And so I think, highlighting some of that on a resume too kind of paints a picture of who that person is.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Wonderful,
And if
wonderful.
they've received any type of scholarships or awards um, for, their volunteer service, or for even, you know, their grades, whether it's, an honor roll or receiving a scholarship
Hmm.
or, anything like that, just kind of shows what type of person they are.
Wonderful, wonderful. Earlier you were talking about tailoring resumes. This is, I want to know what's the best way to do it, because take someone who start college, never had to worry about finding a job before, and then now all of a sudden they are going to, maybe they may be going to the career advising center trying to do that now. Tailor the resume for each job application.
Yes.
What according to you, what would be the best way to do that?
I would say the first thing they should do is have an objective. And so, their objective can be tailored to that position they're applying for.
Mhm.
So, you know, to obtain a position as a radio announcer
Mhm.
at the Flag Family Media, right?
Okay.
So that's very specific. They're saying what they want to do and for what company.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's what they need to do, get that employer's attention right away. So
Mhm.
tailor it to the position and the company they're applying for.
Wonderful. I like that. Have an objective to obtain such position in that. So obviously, not you're probably not gonna get a director position right away. So,
Right. But sometimes
but
people do it like a generic,
yeah, yeah,
like objective, like
yeah.
to obtain a position at a growing company.
Hmm.
Well, not every company is growing,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so you, you don't disqualify yourself, right?
Hmm.
And that's very generic. You want to be specific, letting that employer know you're applying for their position at their company.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So, uh, are there any specific words or phrases that job seekers or should avoid having on their resume?
Should avoid.
Yeah, anything that they
Mm,
should avoid having on their resume.
well, I wouldn't necessarily say avoid, but having I don't know, putting certain dates on there.
Mm-hmm.
For example, let's just say you're a non-traditional student and you're going back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe don't put the year you graduated, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because that just sets you up for age discrimination. I
Mm-hmm.
guess it doesn't matter if you're non-traditional or traditional. They don't An employer doesn't need to know the year that
Mm-hmm.
you graduated. They
Yeah,
just need
yeah.
to know that you have the education. And so, I mean, just stating that you are a graduate.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I like you say that because that leads right into my next question, which is how should a candidate address employment gap
Mm,
within or job experience in
yep.
their resume?
Well, I'll tell you what,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty passionate about gaps because what happens in those gaps? And I think what happens is employers or people jump to conclusions when they see too big of a gap,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But what really happens is life happens
Yeah, yeah.
during those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody went back to school
Mm-hmm.
during that time. Maybe somebody had a baby during that time.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody was caring for a sick parent
Mm-hmm.
during that gap. And I mean, people can, if they want, I guess, explain their gap if they feel comfortable. Um, but I think what happens is people just go right to the negative.
Yeah.
And really, there's some really positive things that can happen during that gap of employment. And as long as they can get a chance for an interview, you can explain yourself if you're, comfortable.
Yeah.
But so many times I think people just, yeah, oh, they must have been incarcerated or they must have been fired or, they
Yeah.
just jump to conclusions without
Yeah.
asking the person.
Wonderful. So I'm glad you mentioned that because that's one of the things that sometimes I used to have what people I have a few people ask me that before, and I'm not in a position to hire people. I only, have many interns and people that volunteer for
Hmm.
professional lunch. But uh is there a way to explain that, or maybe you probably won't be able to do it on the resume, right? But
Well, a great way, I
mhm,
mean, maybe not to have a gap
mhm,
too, is if you're unemployed or if there's a period of time before you accept another role,
mhm.
a great way to fill that gap would be by volunteering somewhere. And so
Okay.
if somebody said, well, gosh, were laid off, whatever, 6 months ago, what have you been doing? Well, I have been volunteering with, and you can explain, where you've been volunteering
Yeah.
because people can gain valuable skills
Mhm.
by volunteering somewhere. You don't have to get paid,
Mhm.
to do a job, but you can volunteer somewhere. And that can open up a door to lead you to all different
Yeah, in
opportunities.
volunteering, it doesn't have to be official volunteering. You can be
Right.
unofficially volunteering, maybe a
Yep.
couple hours here, a couple hours there,
Absolutely.
and learn some skills. Very good. I'm gonna steal that answer.
Yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
So let's switch the conversation now to networking, and we all know how good it is to have a good network, and also me myself, I like to take it a little further and call professional relationships,
Hmm.
right? And because you can have many people in your network, but if you don't have good professional relationships, you may not be able to introduce someone to one of your connections. And
Right.
so that's having good professional relationships. So what role does networking play in job search, and how
Uh,
can young professional build those meaningful connections?
Well, networking is the number one way to find a job.
Hmm.
Statistics prove it.
Yes.
63% of all jobs are found through networking.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So I come across a similar, sorry, just
yeah.
to bunch into this, but I come across a similar statistic that says last year, 2023, 40% of all jobs that were filled thanks to a connection. So
Uh-huh.
63%, that is way higher.
Yes.
It's
And some depends on, what you're
yeah,
looking at.
exactly, exactly.
But, you're looking at job
Hmm.
boards, you're looking at
LinkedIn is
yeah,
looking at
LinkedIn.
Indeed.
There's all sorts
Yeah.
Indeed, yeah, there's all sorts of places that
Hmm.
and then there's like, that hidden job market out there too. But
Yeah.
networking really is the number one way.
To
And
find.
like to find a job. And I used to do when I worked for job service, I used to do a networking workshop.
Hmm.
And it was fun because I would have people get up off their seats and introduce themselves. And, we would play like a little icebreaker game, just to get people up and talking to other people. Introduce yourself
Hmm.
and ask them a question. And, because you never know who you're going to meet or where that door is going to lead or,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
And anyway, so it was always kind of a fun, just little icebreaker, to get the group going.
Hmm.
But I would ask the question, how many of you have ever found a job through networking? And, and you'd get a few hands that would raise. And I'm like, come on, think about it. What about babysitting
Hmm.
or mowing the neighbor's lawn? Didn't you get that maybe through your parents? And then all of a sudden people think about it and it's like,
Yep.
oh, yeah, I did get that because of that.
Yeah,
And so, I mean, then more hands would go up and, almost everybody in the room had a
yeah,
story. And
yeah.
so then I would let people share their story
Hmm.
of how they found that job. And it's fun to hear how people, very rarely do people just, apply for a position, who knows where, and just happen by
To have,
chance to
yeah,
get that job
yep.
because, random person applying. It really is seriously because when you know somebody
Hmm.
or somebody knows you or they can give you a referral, it's like pulling a needle out of a haystack
Hmm.
because you're putting your name behind somebody
Yes.
and referring them to the job.
Hmm.
And it really helps that hiring employer, that's hiring for that job, because you can tell them a little bit about that person or give them personal, testimonial or
Yeah.
yeah, a reference for them.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that's you really I know earlier we were talking about
Yeah.
that, but you're answering the question. I love the way you put the answers together. So, and let's talk about we talk about networking.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is a
Yes.
very it's a great site out there for everybody. I think it's number one around in the world for that. So, how can student leverage a platform like LinkedIn to expand their professional network?
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
think every student, should have a professional LinkedIn account,
mhm,
and then use like your Instagram and Facebook and some of those other, TikTok. That's more personal,
mhm.
but keep that LinkedIn account for more professional networking.
Little cleaner, huh?
Yes, cleaner. And make sure that your picture is professional.
Yeah.
Don't have it with your pet or wearing a hat. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just have a professional picture on
Yes.
there. Yeah. I mean, I think that's great advice because whether we like it or not, people are going to go out and check you out. They're going to look you up, that
Mhm.
whether it's a recruiter or an HR manager, whoever it is going to go look up your name and see who you are. And
Yeah.
I mean, people do it all the time. And so the more professional you can portray yourself, whether it's your photo or even um, your experience on your LinkedIn profile.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The better,
And
right?
then ask too for recommendations. I mean,
Yeah.
people will go out and write, a recommendation for you. I mean, that acts as kind of like a personal testimonial or a reference for you
Hmm.
too.
Hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. So, um, professional lunch. As we share that, I shared that with you before. We are building a mentoring platform for young professionals to be able to connect with mentors, and that plays right into our next question. Until we have that, so what are some of the effective way for to reach out to industry professionals or potential mentors without looking pushy or pushy being like too much.
Well, I would say um, if you can have somebody introduce you to
Hmm.
somebody,
Yes.
and just ask people, because most of the time people want to help others,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Do you know anybody that works at, you know, X?
Hmm.
Could you introduce me to somebody at the, right? And if somebody knows somebody, and you're, asking a favor and you're a good person, I don't see why somebody wouldn't make
Yeah.
that introduction for
And I
you.
think, one thing that stops that sometimes, we are scared. We are
Yes,
shy.
you are people, they're afraid of rejection.
Yes, yes.
And if you really think about it, like what's the worst they're going to do?
Say
Are they
no.
going to say no?
Right.
Well, then you just find somebody else, or you find another angle,
Mhm.
or you know, send a message to them telling them why, that
Mhm.
you would like to meet with them.
Yeah, yeah. Is there a way that, candidates can get noticed by hiring managers before they apply for a position?
Sure. You can, reach out to somebody and see if you could maybe do a job shadow or interview them about the company, or
Hmm.
just ask them about their own personal, um, their personal story, or how they got,
Hmm.
to be where they're at today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Show some interest in them and how they got there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good. So, before we go to the next part of the conversation, I want to thank our sponsor for the day. This professional lunch is brought to you by the Fieldstone Group. Uh, we thank you for supporting professional lunch. And now we're going to talk about interviewing skills, right? So this is everybody. You can put as many resume as possible, but until you get an interview, you know, it's you're not there. You're not even close, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, what are the most common interview questions that recent graduates should be prepared to answer?
Oh
Can give
gosh.
me a few, like a couple of
Sure.
few.
Well, there's always the standard ones,
Mm-hmm.
like, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Or, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And, I think just having those, just, preparing for those or thinking about them, um, whether they ask it or not,
Mm-hmm.
um, can help you because, for example, somebody may not ask you, like, what is your biggest strength? But they might ask you something that's very similar that you can tailor your story around that strength. What is your biggest accomplishment in life?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, you could think of what could that be? And if you're just a high school student or going into college, you don't have a lot to draw on,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they graduated debt free.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge accomplishment,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Or they put themselves through college without, getting student loans.
Mm-hmm.
Think about things like that. They don't have to, have a story of, I'm the CEO of my own startup or
Mm-hmm.
anything, but they can think of some accomplishments that they've had in their life.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Very good. There's one of the question that everybody's always worried about. They tell me about yourself question.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to ask this question? And what has been the best way, to you to frame that and answer to that question?
Yeah. And that question is really kind of an icebreaker, I
Mm-hmm.
think, just to get the conversation going.
Mm-hmm.
And many times an employer really doesn't want to know about your life history, right? They want to know what type of person you are. They want to know, if you're, a go-getter. They want to know, what your, I don't know. They want to know more about you and not your past.
Yeah.
So they want to know where you're going.
Yeah. So you were talking about the weakness earlier, weakness and
Yes.
strength. So what are some other strategies to handle tough questions and
Yeah.
question about areas of weakness? And I know this
Yeah.
alone could take a full hour of
Oh
the
gosh.
interview. Yeah. But what are some other strategies? Can you share some with us? How to handle tough interviews and answer question about weakness, about your weakness?
Well, sometimes your biggest strength is your biggest weakness,
Mhm,
or your biggest weakness is your biggest strength.
mhm,
Um, I guess you can always add some humor to it.
mhm,
And this happened to me once upon a time, and I used it a couple times. So somebody asked me that question, and I said, well, I can't sing. And the guy looked at me like, "What?" And I thought, "Well, I'm not lying because I really can't." And it had nothing to do with the job,
Yes,
right?
but it break the ice a
It
little bit.
broke the ice,
Yeah,
and we laughed about it, and we went, and, and then we just had a little conversation. I'm like,
yeah,
"I wouldn't have to sing for the chef, would I?"
yeah.
No, no, no. And then we just went on
Yeah.
because sometimes they're asking you questions that are just on a list or a sheet of paper, and
Yeah.
you have to remember too. Sometimes the people that are interviewing you aren't. I mean, they're just as nervous,
Yes.
right?
Mhm,
And so they're just kind of going through a checklist,
mhm.
right? Um, another one I said one time, they asked me that weakness thing. And of course, I'm not going to say, well, gosh, I don't have very good time management. That would be
Mhm.
horrible. You don't want to say that.
Yeah.
Um, but, I joked and I just said, well, I mentioned that I really like chocolate. That was a weakness of mine. And then, of
Mhm,
course, we laughed
mhm,
about that too.
mhm.
So you can kind of use humor if the
If if
situation
if
is,
it's called for it.
yeah,
But again, do you think that using the humor to at least break the ice, but how do you proceed? Because I would
yeah.
expect they would want you to give like an answer that is meaningful to the position that you are
Yes, exactly.
applying for.
I
Yes.
think if you come back with something positive,
Hmm.
like I don't, I don't have experience, in this role, but
Hmm.
I'm willing to learn. And how are you going to overcome that weakness,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have that experience yet, or you're willing to research it, or take classes, or whatever you can do
Hmm.
to overcome that weakness, or
Oh,
you've been working on it.
wonderful, wonderful. So, usually after the interview, we encourage candidate to follow up. What or how can candidate follow up in a way after an interview that leaves a positive,
Yeah.
impact on
Right. Well, whether
the
it's
impression?
sending an email um, to thank them, or a handwritten note,
Hmm.
um, a phone call, dropping something off, you know, anything, any type of follow up is
Hmm.
better than nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't tell you how many times in my career that, you've had to, it should be something that just kind of comes naturally, but you have to prompt people and remind them to
Hmm.
thank people.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a client one time, and he had two candidates that were, you know, very equal with their backgrounds, and I was just kind of curious too. I was kind of like, which one did you end up hiring?
Hmm.
Because he was going back and forth, and this was my time, when I was at job service, and I didn't want to tell him which person to hire. That wasn't up to me. That was his decision,
Hmm.
but we had looked, I helped him with the pre-screen and stuff, and we looked at them. And anyway, he ended up telling me which one he had hired.
Hmm.
And I said, well, what was the difference? And he said, she sent me a thank you.
Mm.
And I thought, wow. So that was the differentiator, two equal people, equal experience, right? But it was the one that sent the thank you.
Yeah. So that's a great example. But also on the flip side of that, there are people that they say that, well, every time I send an email, I never get a response back.
Mm-hmm.
The recruiter may not, the HR director or
Yep.
whoever may not reply, but should you tell them because of the fact that they know you send that thank you matter?
Yes, it
Yeah, so
does.
that's the one thing.
And so many times, whether it's a recruiter or an HR manager or whoever is hiring,
Mm-hmm.
the thing is you have to remember that they have a job to do.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, now having to hire for another position is that much more time and stress on them, that it's maybe not that they don't want to reply, it's just they just don't have the time to reply back. But they will remember
Mm-hmm.
that you did.
Yes,
And they're
yes.
also going to remember the people that don't.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
that's very very good, very good. So we'll switch now to a different to internships and experience,
sure.
right? So again, this conversation is designed to help young professionals launch their careers, and obviously internship and experience matter because when you go for apply for a job, they will ask you for 3 to 5 years of experience, right?
Hmm.
And so now, how valuable are internships for students seeking full time employment, and how should they highlight them on their resume?
Oh, well, an internship is just like a job.
Hmm.
And that's, whether it's good or bad, I mean, a student is going to learn from that. And sometimes, I mean, just as good for the employer, because maybe they're getting some projects done,
Mhm.
or maybe that person that's training them is they learn, from that student as well, and
Yeah.
they're gaining another relationship, too. It could lead down the path where they hire them
Mhm.
at the end of the internship, or um, maybe after the student graduates. I think they give special treatment
Yeah.
to those people that have given to them because they know a little bit about their organization.
Yeah.
But yeah, internships are super valuable. Not every company, I guess, has the time for an internship because it does take time.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not just about, I don't know, you don't want to give somebody an internship just because you want to give them a whole bunch of work that you don't have time for.
Mhm.
That is not the objective
Yeah.
of an internship at all. So hopefully, an employer has a well thought out um, program when they
Yeah.
bring somebody in.
Yeah. That's very, very important. So, what advice would you give students who couldn't secure an internship, and how can they still demonstrate that they have relevant skills for the position?
Well, and that's just it. I think an employer might have to take a little bit of a risk
Mhm.
because that's why the employee or the student is looking for an internship is to gain that experience. They're interested in that field. They're interested in that company. They're interested in gaining new skills.
Mhm.
And so not everybody's going to have the experience up until that point.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a risk, I guess, for the employer.
Mhm.
But hopefully it's well worth the risk.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like earlier we were talking about volunteering, and I had that question to
Yeah.
ask: how can young professionals, make the most out of volunteering opportunities,
Oh,
or even campus leadership position that
yeah.
that is available when applying for a job?
Oh, yeah. So whether it's a campus club or a fraternity or a sorority, or even volunteering, or joining a service club like Rotary or Kiwanis or
Mhm.
Optimist, something like that, um, or even a nonprofit,
Yeah.
that you're passionate about. If you love animals, maybe you want to, you know, volunteer for the Homeward Animal Shelter, or
Mhm.
maybe you had a loved one that had cancer. Maybe you can volunteer for the American Cancer Society. Volunteer where you're passionate,
Yeah.
right? And get involved. And don't just volunteer to say you volunteered.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it for the right reasons,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll change. We'll switch a little bit now to industry specific advice. So, what are some industries that are particularly welcoming to recent graduate, and which industries are more competitive?
Oh boy.
That's
Well,
tough
right
one.
now, I think, most industries
Uh-huh.
are looking for people. I
Yeah.
mean, and looking for good people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, there's a talent shortage. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's not getting any easier
Yeah.
to find good people. And I think everybody's kind of fighting for that same recent college grad,
Mm-hmm.
um, or even that high school graduate.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's an entry level position. I mean, sometimes those are harder to fill than professional positions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there looking for workers. It's just how do you penetrate that, right,
Mm-hmm.
and get into
Mm-hmm.
the right industry. So I think having your degree in that area,
Mm-hmm.
um, nobody can ever take away your education.
Yeah.
And so by having education in that field, obviously is should help open up a door.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, we can agree that there are many fields that many students who graduate, and sometimes they would like to try to find a career in a field that is different than their field of study. Do you have any advice on how they can go about that?
Yeah, I mean that one's a little bit harder
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have the experience or the education in that field,
Yeah.
and so that's where maybe is even taking a class
Mm-hmm.
or getting a certificate, um, volunteering, um, job shadowing.
Mm-hmm.
something that steers them to that other occupation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, and this is, I think we have the conversation before about soft skills. Um, what soft skills do you think are more important or most important for young professionals to develop early in their career?
Well, problem solving is huge,
Yeah.
right? Critical thinking, um, and even just having good manners, saying
Hmm.
please and thank you, and um, and just having really good listening skills.
Hmm.
I think sometimes when people are nervous, they talk too much,
Hmm.
and being able to be a good listener, I think is really key. Um, Good customer service,
Yeah.
right? Although and what's hard, it's hard to teach some of those skills. Some of those are you learn them as you grow up, whether it's from your family or friends, teachers, whatever. But
Mhm.
you really need to learn some of them
Yeah.
um, because they're hard. They're hard to obtain. It's hard to teach somebody good manners, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's that kind of take into workplace behaviors, and so what mentioning as you are mentioning the skill, one thing I'm thinking is like how can you tell those young professionals to really adapt some workplace behaviors that can help them thrive in their first job.
Sure. Well, I think having, professional communication,
Hmm.
um, even like via email,
Hmm.
let's say. I think people are used to texting and short phrases
Yeah,
and not,
yeah.
proper punctuation. But having professional communication
Hmm.
with your emails, I think that really helps too. And
Yeah.
just having really good internal, customer service, treating your coworkers like you would treat somebody, on the outside. Don't be short with them,
Hmm.
making sure that your tone is positive
Yeah.
and that you're thanking them.
Hmm.
Um, you're not interrupting people. Just being really mindful of that. I
Yeah.
think that helps.
Wonderful, wonderful. This is great content, and some of the things that you're saying right now, I wish I didn't have to learn them on my own
Yeah.
when I started out. But very, very, very important. And so, for long-term career development, what advice do you have for young professionals to not only land a job but also set themselves up for long-term career growth?
Oh boy.
Hmm. Oh, boy.
Well, I mean, never stop learning,
Yeah.
right? Be a lifelong learner. Be curious.
Hmm.
Having that curiosity to know more and know the why
Yeah.
behind things. I think that helps.
Hmm.
It shows interest, and whether it's for advancement or for your own personal
Yeah.
journey.
Hmm.
Yeah, just be curious.
Wonderful. You share quite a bit about how young professionals can really go about finding a job and launch their careers. Um, I would like to. What do you do now in your current position?
Sure. Well,
Hmm.
I'm an HR business consultant,
Yeah.
and so um, what that is it's really even more of a sales role.
Hmm.
I'm working, with business owners and decision makers, um, and trying to find their pain points and see if we can solve them. So we help employers in the areas of HR, payroll,
Hmm.
employee benefits, safety, compliance, wellness, unemployment,
Wow.
workers' comp, you
Hmm.
name it.
Hmm.
Anything that has to do with an employee.
Hmm.
And so when we can take that burden off of a business owner's plate, they can focus more on their business and focus on their people and focus on their culture. And when that happens, their business will grow.
Yeah.
And so we can help them just by streamlining a lot of those processes.
Mhm. Wonderful, wonderful. Chris, you know how much I appreciate you. And, we meet many times. You have given me so many great advice. And it's so good to have you on Professional Lunch today. So, um, last few minutes of the conversation. So, what are some of your last few words for the Professional Lunch audience?
Oh gosh.
Hmm.
Well, I would just say don't be afraid to meet new people
Mhm.
or to expand your network. Um, again, the worst thing is going to happen is somebody's going to say no.
Yep.
But yeah, just yeah, don't be afraid. Put yourself out there. Go to events. Introduce yourself. Make sure that you always have maybe a copy of your resume with you, whether that's electronically or even a hard copy in your car, because
Mhm.
you just never know who you're going to meet
Yep.
and how that door is going to open and where that path is going to lead.
Wonderful, wonderful. Chris, thank you so much for being on Professional Lunch today. Uh, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. So, as we are planning to get ready to continue to developing our platform, with our mentoring platform, I really want us to all to stay in touch because I
Absolutely.
enjoy talking to you and I enjoy your advice and your input and your feedback on everything that I'm doing. So, and you have been in that line of work for such a long time.
Yeah.
You know, your expertise and your wisdom really come in handy. So,
Oh, well, thank you. And thank
so
you for inviting me to
you
be
know,
on this. Yes.
no problem. Thank you so much. Now, you know, Professional Lunch is a nonprofit organization, and we rely on guests, friends, and other organizations to keep our podcast going and also continue developing our project. So we rely on you. We thank you for your contribution already, but as we are getting into the season of giving, this is the time to think about Professional Lunch.
Mhm.
And remember, we are part of Giving Hearts Day this year in 2025. So as you are scrolling down, find us and support us so that we can get this platform going. So we thank you for being a friend of Professional Lunch. Now, this is the part that I tell you. It's up to you to make today a great day. Have a great day. Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Wonderful.